Shalom, Israel. Most High in Christ bless. Can everybody hear me and see me clearly? And do I have a scribe on deck? All right, Brother Michael, today is your day. All right, Israel. Most High in Christ bless. Iuic 4 chapters a day. Yesterday, we were going through chapters 2 through 6. No, 2 through 5. No, 2 through 5. Went through chapters 2 through 5. Just to recap, Vashti thought she was too much, got replaced. Esther, or Hadassah, was chosen. Her name was changed to Esther. Hadassah was a Benjamite who was raised by her uncle. Her uncle's name is Mordecai. Mordecai saved the king's life from a coup that was being plotted against him. And in that, nothing had happened as of yet to Mordecai that the king was aware of. Haman, the Agagite, Amalekite, Edomite, was hating on Mordecai because Mordecai never bowed down to him every time he entered into the room. Why? Because we don't bow down to men. All right? And because of this, Haman spread a rumor and basically got in the king's ear and was able to have King Ahasuerus, or Xerxes the first. He was able to have him write and publish something throughout all of his kingdom that all of the Jews would get put to death. All right, and that's where we left off. And we're gonna see what's gonna become of good old Haman. I was reading this earlier. It put a smile on my face. It really did. So, going to start Esther chapter 6, verse 1. Esther chapter 6, verse 1. All right? It said, on that night could not the king sleep, and he commanded to bring the book of records of the Chronicles, and they were read before the king. Like I said last time, just like these other nations kept chronicles and records of their history, so did we. So did we. That's what this Bible is. It's a record of our history that we kept throughout all of our captivities. Moses started it off, and we kept it going. All right? Verse 2, and it was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigna. Excuse me. Verse 2 again. And it was found written that Mordecai had told Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's chamberlains, the keepers of the door, who sought to lay hand on the king Ahasuerus. And the king said, What honor and dignity hath been done to Mordecai for this? Then the king's servants that ministered unto him said unto him, Then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, There is nothing done for him. And the king said, Who is in the court? Now Haman was coming to the outward court of the king's house to speak unto the king to hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. So remember, last chapter, Haman was told by his wife, Haman the Edomite was told by his wife, make a gallows 50 feet high and hang Mordecai from that. So he said, all right, bet, that's what I'm about to do. So as he was going to come and tell the king, hey, we should make the gallows to hang Mordecai on, the king just got reminded of when Mordecai saved his life. This is the same Mordecai that's a Jew who is the uncle of Esther. This dude saved the king's life from a coup that was going to happen under his own roof. So the king was like, who did anything for this man? Like, what was done for this man for him saving my life? And they said, nobody did nothing for him. So as he was coming in, as Haman was coming in, watch what the king is going to ask Haman. This is how the Lord works. Haman was coming to tell the king to hang Mordecai, and the king just found out that Mordecai was the one that saved his life. Watch this. Verse 5. And the king's servant said unto him, Behold, Haman standeth in the court. And the king said, Let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king said unto him, What shall be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honor? Now Haman thought in his heart, To whom would the king delight to do honor more than to myself? So Haman was so prideful. This dude was so full of himself. So all the king said was, Hey, what do you think I should do to give this man some honor? And instead of saying, well, who are you talking about? Haman already assumed, well, he must be talking about me, because who's better than me in the kingdom right now? All right, let's see. Verse 7. And Haman answered the king, For the man whom the king delighted to honor, let the royal apparel be brought which the king useth to wear, and the horse that the king rideth on, and the crown royal which is set upon his head. And let this apparel and horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that they may array that man, the man withal whom the king delighteth to honor, and bring him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaim before him, Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delighteth to honor. So this dude had it decked out, was already planned out for himself. Like, look, you want to do this? Look, have him have the king's clothes, let him ride on the king's horse, let him have the king's crown on his head, let him be paraded through the streets of the city. If you want to honor him, this man, this is what I suggest that you do. Now, this dude thought that he was talking about himself. Au contraire. Verse 10. Then the king said to Haman, Make haste, and take the apparel and the horse, as thou hast said, and do even so to Mordecai the Jew, that sitteth at the king's gate. Let nothing fail of all that thou hast spoken. So, boom! The king said, you know what? That's a really good idea. I like the way you think, Haman. Now take everything that you just said and do it to Mordecai. That's how the Lord works. That's how the Lord works. That should put a smile on your face. What they meant for evil, God meant for good. Verse 11. Then took Haman the apparel and the horse, and arrayed Mordecai, and brought him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaimed before him, Thus shall it be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honor. Ain't that something? All that stuff, this dude was so high-minded. He hated Mordecai so much, and he was so high-minded himself, that everything he thought that he should have for himself, it was all given to our forefathers. Verse 12. And Mordecai came again to the king's gate, but Haman hasted to his house mourning, and having his head covered. And Haman told Zoresh's wife and all his friends everything that had befallen him. Then said his wise men and Zeresh his wife unto him, If Mordecai be of the seed of the Jews, before whom thou hast begun to fall, thou shalt not prevail against him, but shalt surely fall before him. And while they were yet talking with him, came the king's chamberlains and hastened to bring Haman unto the banquet that Esther had prepared. Remember in the previous chapter, Esther prepared a banquet for the king because she heard about the proclamation that went out against our people. So she had it in her mind like, all right, Mordecai, my uncle, told me to go to the king and let him know everything that's going on. Of course, the king is going to listen. Esther is the baddest woman in the kingdom. She's an Israelite, and the king loves her. So of course he's going to listen. Why? Because men listen to their women, whether for good or whether for evil. Now, in this case, it was meant for our good, because while Haman was trying to get Mordecai killed, remember, there was already something that was planned out. Esther had it already planned out. So this banquet that she had prepared, he just decked out Mordecai and all of what he said should happen for whoever the king delights in. And now he's reminded, oh snap, I got to go to this banquet with the king and with Esther. Watch this. Chapter 7, verse 1. So the king and Haman came to the banquet with Esther the queen. And the king said again unto Esther on the second day at the banquet of wine, What is thy petition, Queen Esther? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? And it shall be performed, even to the half of the kingdom. Then Esther the queen answered and said, If I have found favor in thy sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish. But if we had been sold for bondmen and bondwomen, I had held my tongue, although the enemy could not countervail the king's damage. Then the king Ahasuerus answered and said unto Esther the queen, Who is he, and where is he, that durst presume in his heart to do so? So she's like, look, me and my people, we going through it. We being sold, we being killed. Now, if we was just being sold, that would be one thing. But people are trying to kill us. There's somebody that's out there that's trying to kill us and my people. They're trying to do us some harm. So the king's like, who trying to do you something? All right. Verse 6. And Esther said, the adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. Then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen. So while they sitting there, Haman probably stuffing his face. He probably can't hardly eat because he just decked out Mordecai. And he just heard what his wife and his friends told him. Like, man, look, if Mordecai's a Jew and you just did that proclamation against the Jews, something about to happen to you. And then right at the dinner table, it's this wicked Haman, him right here. That dude probably almost diarrheaed on himself. Verse 7. And the king, arising from the banquet of wine in his wrath, went into the palace garden. And Haman stood up to make request for his life to Esther the queen, for he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king. Then the king returned out of the palace garden into the palace of the banquet of wine. And Haman was fallen upon the bed whereon Esther was. Then said the king, Will he force the queen also before me in the house? As the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. So this dude, the king gets up and runs out like, you know what? I need to take a breath of fresh air real quick. He come back and Haman is laid out on the bed begging. Now in the king's eyes, he already mad. He like, so what, you trying to take my woman too? Soon as he said that, they put the bag over Haman's face. You visualize that. This dude is crying. He on the bed next to Esther. You shouldn't even be near this woman. As soon as the king thought what he thought and said that out of his mouth, bag over their head. Verse 9. And Harbona, one of the chamberlain said before the king, behold also the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman had made for Mordecai, who had spoken good for the king, standeth in the house of Haman. Then the king said, hang him thereon. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then was the king's wrath pacified. So somebody came up to the king and was like, hey, look, you remember them gallows? That's what Haman had made for Mordecai. Really? Hang him on those gallows. Yes. That's the God that we serve. That's how he moves. He's a man of war. This is chess. Chapter 8, verse 1. On that day did the king Ahasuerus give the house of Haman, the Jews' enemy, unto Esther the queen. So they gave his whole house to Esther. And Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told what he was unto her. So Esther came in forth and said, look, I'm a Jew. Mordecai is my uncle. And this is that same uncle that saved your life, that Haman wanted to kill. Watch this. Verse 2. And the king took off his ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it unto Mordecai. And Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. So everything that Haman had, give it to Mordecai. Everything he had, give it to Mordecai. And Esther spake yet again before the king, and fell down at his feet, and besought him with tears to put away the mischief of Haman the Agagite, and the device that he had devised against the Jews. Then the king held out the golden scepter toward Esther. So Esther arose and stood before the king, and said, if it please the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, and the thing seemed right before the king, I be pleasing in his eyes, let it be written to reverse the letters devised by Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, which he wrote to destroy the Jews which are in all the king's provinces. For how can I endure to see the evil that shall come unto my people? For how can I endure to see the destruction of my kindred? Then the king Ahasuerus said unto Esther the queen, and to Mordecai the Jew, behold, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and him they have hanged upon the gallows, because he laid his hand upon the Jews. Write ye also for the Jews, as it liketh you, in the king's name, and seal it with the king's ring. For the writing which is written in the king's name and sealed with the king's ring, may no man reverse. So Esther and Mordecai both was able to write down a proclamation in the name of the king, meaning in the reputation of the king. The king's word was behind that letter, and they were able to write and reverse everything that Haman had set forth. Verse 9. Then were the king's scribes called at that time in the 3rd month, that is the month Sivan, on the 23rd day thereof. And it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded unto the Jews, and to the lieutenants, and to the deputies and rulers of the provinces, which are from India unto Ethiopia, in 127 provinces, unto every province according to the writing thereof, and unto every place, and unto every people after their language, and to the Jews according to their writing, according to their language. So you got to remember, this is the Persian Empire. This is the Persian Empire. It said from India all the way over to Ethiopia. This is the span of the kingdom of the Persians. All of that right there. From India to Ethiopia. All of that was the Persian Empire. All of that. So they had wrote letters throughout all of that, because Israel was scattered all over there. Israel was scattered from India to Ethiopia. Boom, boom. It wasn't just in one concentrated place the entire time. Our captivity, we were spread out. So to show you, we have history somewhere in India. We have it there. Verse 10. And he wrote in in the king Ahasuerus' name, and sealed it with the king's ring, and sent letters by post on horseback, and riders on mules, camels, and young dromedaries, wherein the king granted the Jews, which were in every city, to gather themselves together, to stand for their life, to destroy, to slay, and to cause to perish all the power of the people in the province that would assault them, both little ones and women, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. So everybody that was listening to the proclamation that was given by Haman, everybody that was listening to that, kill them. Y'all have carte blanche to exact revenge on anybody that tried to do y'all wrong. Verse 12. Upon one day in all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, namely upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, the copy of the writing for a commandment to be given in every province was published unto all the people, and that the Jews should be ready against that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. Why? Because there is nothing else that will pacify the Lord other than vengeance on our enemies. And we're not going to take vengeance now, but Christ will take vengeance, and then He's going to allow us to get our little kicks in. Verse 14. So the posts that rode on mules and camels went out, being hastened and pressed on by the king's commandment, and the decree was given at Shushan the palace. And Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal apparel of blue and white, and with a great crown of gold, and with a garment of fine linen, and purple. And the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad. The Jews had light and gladness and joy and honor, and in every province and in every city, whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, the Jews had joy and gladness, a feast and a good day, and many of the people of the land became Jews, for the fear of the Jews fell upon them. So a lot of the people became converts, and they started worshiping our God and doing the customs of us. Why? Because they did it out of fear, much like what's going to happen in the future. They're going to serve our God just like we are. Our purpose is going to be to enforce the commandments of God on the entire world, just like back then. Why? Because the fear of us is going to be on all nations. All praise to the Lord for that thing. Chapter 9. All right. This is going into the Feast of Purim, the explanation of it. So y'all brothers write down. Esther 9 explains Purim. That is a high holy day of ours. We know when Thanksgiving and Christmas is. We know when Easter. We know when Valentine's Day is. Some of us still know when Mother's and Father's Day is. We know all of that stuff. We better know God's high holy days. Esther chapter 9, verse 1. Now in the 12th month, that is the month of Adar, on the 13th day of the same, when the king's commandment and his decree drew near to be put in execution, in the day that the enemies of the Jews hoped to have power over them, though it was turned to the contrary, that the Jews had rule over them that hated them. The Jews gathered themselves together in their cities throughout all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus to lay hand on such as sought their hurt, and no man could withstand them, for the fear of them fell upon all people. And all the rulers of the provinces, and the lieutenants, and the deputies, and the officers of the king helped the Jews, because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. Remember what it said in the last chapter. Mordecai put the edict out. Now, it was because Esther that he was able to get the job done, but Mordecai wrote the edict. Mordecai wrote the proclamation. Mordecai is who they was afraid of. So just because Esther was queen, she was still subject to Mordecai, the man of Israel. Verse 4. For Mordecai was great in the king's house, and his fame went out throughout all the provinces. For this man Mordecai waxed greater and greater. Thus the Jews smote all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, and slaughter, and destruction, and did what they would unto those that hated them. And in Shushan the palace the Jews slew and destroyed 500 men. And Parshan Datha, and Dalphon, and Aspatha, and Poratha, and Adalia, and Aridatha, and Parmishta, and Arasai, and Aradai, and Dajestatha, the 10 sons of Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews, slew they. But on the spoil laid not their hand. On that day, the number of those that were slain in Shushan the palace was brought before the king. And the king said unto Esther the queen, the Jews have slain and destroyed 500 men in Shushan the palace, and the 10 sons of Haman. What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now what is thy petition? And it shall be granted thee. Or what is thy request further? And it shall be done. So look, this guy, he was so gone behind Esther that he said, look, y'all exacted revenge on all y'all enemies. Haman is dead, and his son. Is there anything else that you want? Is there something else that you want? Something else that you need? Something else that I could provide for you? Verse 13. Then said Esther, if it please the king, let it be granted to the Jews which are in Shushan to do tomorrow according unto this day's decree, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged upon the gallows. And the king commanded it so to be done. And the decree was given at Shushan, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons. For the Jews that were in Shushan gathered themselves together on the 14th day also of the month Adar, and slew 300 men in Shushan. But on the prey laid not their hand. They laid not their hand. But the other Jews that were in the king's provinces gathered themselves together and stood for their lives, and had rest from their enemies, and slew of their foes 75,000. But they laid not their hands on the prey. On the 13th day of the month Adar, and on the 14th day of the same rested day, and made a day of feasting and gladness. But the Jews that were at Shushan assembled together on the 13th day thereof, and on the 14th day, and on the 14th thereof, and on the 15th day of the same, they rested, and made a day of feasting and gladness. Therefore the Jews of the villages that dwelt in the unwalled towns made the 14th day of the month Adar a day of gladness and feasting, and a good day, and of sending portions one to another. So the Feast of Purim is where we get gift giving. Now you can give gifts on any feast if you can afford it. Like if you got money for the feast of dedication, guess what? Give all gifts 8 days if you want to. But Purim was the day that we were given gifts. Verse 20. And Mordecai wrote these things and sent letters unto all the Jews that were in the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, both nigh and far, to establish this among them, that they should keep the 14th day of the month Adar and the 15th day of the same yearly, as the days wherein the Jews rested from their enemies, and the month which was turned unto them from sorrow to joy, and from mourning into a good day, that they should make them days of feasting and joy, and of sending portions one to another, and gifts to the poor. So that's where the Feast of Purim comes from. It stems from. We had feast days that commemorated the destruction of our enemies. We celebrated when we conquered our enemies. Why? Because that's how it was written. The Lord wanted it like that. That's why we still celebrate Purim today. That's why Christianity will never celebrate Purim. Because the history behind it, you got to know that you got enemies. You got to know that you're an Israelite. You got to know that you're a Jew. You got to know that the holidays that they celebrate in the Christian church is false. You have to know that in order to celebrate this. Verse 23. And the Jews undertook to do as they had begun, and as Mordecai had written unto them, because Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews, had devised against the Jews to destroy them, and had cast Pur, that is, the lot, to consume them and to destroy them. So Pur in the Persian custom was like casting lots. So you would cast a Pur. You cast a Pur or the lot, like how we set gambles, casting lots and stuff like that. Like they casted the lot for Jonah to see whose fault it was and stuff like that. So Pur is casting lots. Verse 25. But when Esther came before the king, he commanded by letters that his wicked device, which he had devised against the Jews, should return upon his own head, and that he and his sons should be hanged on the gallows. Wherefore they call these days Purim, after the name Pur. Therefore all the words of this letter, and of that which they had seen concerning this matter, and which had come unto them, the Jews ordained and took upon them, and upon their seed, and upon all such as joined themselves unto them, so it should not fail, that they would keep these 2 days according to their writing, and according to their appointed time every year. And that these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation, every family, every province, and every city. And that these days of Purim should not fail from among the Jews, nor the memorial of them perish from among their seed, which goes to show you we still celebrate Purim today. Every children, every family, among our seed for generations. This does not stop. Verse 29. Then Esther the queen, the daughter of Abihail, and Mordecai the Jew, wrote with all authority to confirm this second letter of Purim. And he sent letters unto all the Jews to the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus with the words of peace and truth, to confirm these days of Purim in their times appointed, according as Mordecai the Jew and Esther the queen had enjoined them. And as they had decreed for themselves and for their seeds the matters of the fastings and their cries. And the decree of Esther confirmed these matters of Purim, and it was written in the book. What book? Our book. So, much joy. I like reading Esther. Esther got a whole lot of history in it. We got a lot of stuff in it. That concludes our 4 chapters a day. Does anybody have questions about the 4 chapters that we read today? Your question is about Esther's children. As far as I know, I don't remember the Bible talking about Esther's children. But if Esther did have children, they would be Persian. I don't remember seeing anywhere where Esther had children. Esther's children did not come from Haman. Ahasuerus was the king. Haman was the number two. Haman was an Edomite. Ahasuerus was the Persian king. That's who Esther was married to. Haman was not the king. Azariah, yes. Before Mordecai's day, that's what they called it. That was another name for Purim, Mordecai's day. Judah, the school has been open for quite some time now. Yeah, no problem, Newman. No problem. Names get confused when you're reading the history. That's why we have to constantly read the history over and over. But yeah, Haman was a wicked Edomite who got his in the end because he had something to say about our people. Because he was so prideful that he was mad. He was so prideful that Mordecai didn't want to bow down to him. And at the end, Mordecai still was on top. So, LaWanda, do you have the blue and gold feast day garment? Because that's what we wear on feast days, the blue and gold. It's not like we have a specific color that was put out or anything like that. But if you have the blue and gold feast day garment, that's what we wear. We wear it on every feast day. All praise to the Most High, Pablo. Sarah, if you go on IsraelUnite.org, there is a feast day calendar, or you can go on Original Royalty and order the feast day calendar. Purim, let me see, because I got it wrong. If you have a Google Calendar, you can go on IsraelUnite.org and get the calendar sent to your phone. All you gotta do is do that RSS thing. But let me see. You're probably getting, I gotta update my calendar. Matter of fact, my calendar stops at the new moon after the feast of dedication. So, but more than likely it'll be like the end of, like somewhere in February would be Purim. Purim is going to be in February. It's in the 12th month. The first month is around March, April, because that's the spring, the new moon around March, April. And you count from the new moon on back. December is like the 10th month. January is the 11th month. February is the 12th month. Feast of Tabernacles is normally in September. And those of y'all who don't know, look up the class that Bishop did, How to Count the Feast Days. Bishop did a class, How to Count the Feast Days. And you can count from each new moon, and you can get the feast days. You can get all of them. Just go on YouTube, type in Iuic, How to Count the Feast Days. And it's good to know how to count the feast days, because when Esau start coming down with the hammer on us, and we ain't able to do like how we doing now with all of these online classes and stuff like that, you're going to have to know when the feast days are. You're going to have to know when the new moon is. You're going to have to know these things. All right, if nobody else has questions, it was black and silver, LaRonda, but now it's blue and gold, the navy blue and gold. If you don't have the navy blue and gold, then go to black and silver. Still a feast day on it. You don't got a feast day garment? Fringes and a border of blue. That's it. That's the color. Fringes and a border of blue. So shalom. Most High in Christ bless. See y'all next time, I guess. Most High in Christ bless.